And hi, everyone, and welcome to Project 180. This is the show where we talk about project management stuff. And I think today's going to be a really interesting episode, a live experience. We've got three of the authors, well, two authors and editor from a brand new project management book. I want to say welcome to Mark Rozner, John Connolly, and Max Boller. Good morning, gents.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
It's really great to meet you all. Well, John, we've met before actually, but Mark and Max, you're new to me, so hi, great to meet you both. And we do have other people on the call who may want to jump in and ask questions as we go. But I'm wondering first, we can start off with John as editor. If you can give us a bit of the 30,000 foot view or the quick pitch on your new book and tell us what it's all about.
Sure. So the book is called Executing Excellence. It is available for purchase, the ebook, from pretty much every ebook retailer out there, Apple Books and Barnes & Noble and Kobo, and folks can pick up the printed copy through Amazon as well. And it's basically the idea was to get people with project management experience in lots of different walks of life and to have them write essays and draw them all together to kind of a treasury of project wisdom, right? The main question that we asked was, if you could give an insight or a tool or some kind of technique to people who are earlier on the path, what would that be? And then everyone wrote a different essay about that. So we have 10 authors. Max is one, Mark is one, and we have 7 others in addition to myself. Plus Terry Schmidt, who wrote the foreword for us. And it's been very well received. I've been really happy with the feedback that we've gotten so far. And it cleared #1 bestseller in both technical project management and engineering project management on Amazon. And
bravo.
Yeah, it's been great so far. It's been great. And that's what happens, I think, when you get people together who are in project management and open to helping one another and just start doing things together. That usually is a great first jumping off point for big things to happen.
Well, and again, congrats on the launch, first of all, but also on placing so high on the Amazon list. That's fantastic. And it's almost kind of meta, though, right? You're getting how, John, did you approach this from a PM perspective? I'm assuming you're the cat herder in all of this. How did you manage to project manage all these project managers? That's got to be kind of a challenge in itself.
It was a challenge. It was a challenge. For some folks, this is their first time, writing a book. And then for others, they were a bit more seasoned. For some folks, it was a matter of getting the essay to be what they wanted it to be. And for others, it was just a matter of, you took twice the space that we had allotted for this chapter. So we needed to pare things down or dial them back. It was great. We had Adrian Dooley, who was basically the founder. He wrote the book on the Praxis framework, which is very closely aligned to Prince2. I'm very fascinated with that framework for both project, program, and portfolio management. And so I knew I wanted to get him in. The rest of us are very PMI oriented, and that's great as well. It was a challenge, but it was also a joy because I got to grow relationships with everyone who worked on the book. And for me, that's a massive, massive benefit and value to doing a project like this. And largely that's the point, right? Bringing people together. And the background for it all is it was for me anyway, 2 years ago, PMI put out a report on the state of the profession. They're very proud of the fact there are 25 million new roles opening, but more than half of those roles are coming from retirements. And so we have a knowledge transfer problem. And I think we talked about it last time I was on the show, Kevin.
Yeah.
And I want to do things that help bridge that gap. And I do truly believe, and I know Mark and Max can talk to this, that the way to solve that is not necessarily through books, but it's through relationship building. It's through organic community building. And this is a first foray in that direction.
Well, I really appreciate what you're saying about community, and Mark and Max, we'll get to you in just a second, but I know John, I mean, we go back a little bit, a year-ish maybe, but I've, followed you on LinkedIn. I know you're very active and very vocal, and very good at building that community. So this really is a logical next step to do that, and start, collaborating on things that actually will support and help the community. So again, well done. I'm wondering, maybe we can go over to Max, Dr. Max Boller. How are you? You wrote a section about balancing authority and stress. And I want to jump in quickly and say, whenever I've read anything from project management, it's, here's how you do Agile. Here's how you do Scrum. Here's what prints to it, but the chapters in this book don't do that. They're not explainers in that respect. And yours is a perfect example. Balancing, the stressful environment and authority. I wonder if you could talk a little bit, kind of high level, about how you approached your chapter and the subject matter.
Sure. I guess throughout my career, I've had numerous roles where I may have absolute authority over my project. I can make changes. I direct my resources. I am responsible for moving all the pieces around the table. Then there are other projects where I have no authority whatsoever. I have to ask permission for every single thing that comes across my plate and wait for decisions to be made. And that kind of thing kind of builds up a stress inside of you, kind of an anxiety. For me, it built up an anxiety. It's like, oh, I want to get this done. And when I started thinking about it, I tend to just write down my feelings when something's stressing me out. I just start writing away, and a lot of it's nonsense and never will see the light of day. But it's this really, John came to me with this, and I thought, boy, this would be great to get this out there, because project managers, and from experience, we have, at my current role, we have a guy who was a lead tech that came into the office one day and said, "You project managers, you literally just sit there and tell people what to do." Well, after about a year or so of him doing that, the PMO director says, "All right, how would you like to be a project manager?" And he said, "Oh, all right, yeah, we can do that." So for the last year and a half, he has been struggling as a project manager going through things. So the idea of being just a guy who sits there and gives people orders and barks things back and forth was something that was new to him. Well, he started experiencing the stress of being the one responsible for everything that's going on.
Yeah.
So kind of circling back as I got off topic there, but I just I want new project managers to come in and understand that, if you don't have authority, you need to manage that stress level that's going to come up, because it will come up with everything you do. A little bit of stress happens. Even for seasoned project managers who know the processes and know how to do everything, on paper or in practice or over years of experience, they experience that stress. All of a sudden, you get that one tough egg of a resource that really gets underneath your skin, and that causes everything to go the other direction. So that's what I
name
want.
Names, are you? You're not going to name names.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do it. I don't need lawsuits. But I really appreciate that perspective, because most project managers, I think, John, this is actually a quote from you when we last chatted. It's like you're not really, you kind of become a project manager when somebody hands you something and says, "Here, go manage this, go figure it out." And so, maybe you're an independent contributor, you're part of a team, and your stress level is around here, and then all of a sudden you got something new to do, and your stress level just goes like this. And it's because it's a very different skill set. It's it's one thing to work on code or to develop whatever it is you're developing, but then now try and own or be responsible for all the different pieces is very challenging. Interesting pivot, though. I remember you were talking about a second ago, Max. You're talking about the anxiety, the stress of it, which I certainly know to be true myself. But Mark, this is really the focus of your chapter. Was really about, which I found really, I mean, for me, was personally affected by reading your section because of similar experiences, traumatized in various ways, childhood, whatever, like a lot of people have. But you talk about kind of harnessing that anxiety to become a good PM. I'm wondering if you tell me a bit about your journey there.
Yeah, no, and actually, as you said, it's my story, and making it hopefully, and thank you for saying so, relatable to folks. I always felt different, so joining the workforce didn't change, any of that, and I had to find myself going through a process to really understand who I was, what was important to me, and I went back through my decades of experience and said, what made me different? And not in a bad way, but what sets me apart from other project managers? Because I definitely didn't feel, I wasn't the guy that just came over and said, make it happen kind of thing. And so I looked at that and realized, okay, I had to go back even further. Yes, I learned a lot in those 40 some odd years of working, 30 something years of project management. But when I started pulling back the layers, realized it went all the way back to my childhood. And the tools that I learned in literally from almost birth, from 6 months old, had my first trauma in my family, without going into any details. But it was strong enough that I still remember it from 6 months old. And there was this constant chaos throughout my life, and realized that I was building tools first to sort of mitigate, put in some contingency, to put in project management terms, and ultimate find what my success factors were going to be. And so I started to say, all right, how can I relate this directly for both myself and then ultimately for others? So I looked for various frameworks that I could look at conceptually and say, okay, what words are there? So like strength finders. Everyone likes, the Gallup Corp's strength finders. And it said I was an input and I was a collaborator and all those things. I was like, okay, there's a lot of people that fit into that thing. I got to be something a little bit more different. Myers-Briggs says, oh, you're an INFJ. You are unique. You think differently. I'm like, okay, is that a good thing or a bad thing, right?
I think that's a good thing, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, everything I read was like, oh my God, that's so me. But ultimately, I had to find a way to put it into practice. And that's where I started tying things into emotional intelligence, EQ. And realizing that ultimately my difference was my emotional intelligence, and the way I approached people, the way I approached situations. It's again, this was exemplified. I was talking to someone on LinkedIn, and they said, "Mark, we could use your help. I've been told I'm too timid to be a project manager or to be a leader of any kind." Mm-hmm. I said, I've been told that all my life. I was too nice. I've had people tell me I'm too nice. I said, I had to figure out that I was actually kind, not nice. And that my approach with empathy, my approach with actually thinking about the other person, whatever the various EQ were, was actually what made me different.
Yeah, Mark, well, first of all, I know how hard this can be to talk about, even your chapter. It must have been a challenge to kind of reflect on a lot of things. So I just want to share that. I appreciate where you're
Thank you. I thank John for helping me through that. What's in the book is version of what I wrote. The first was overly emotional, and
understood.
I handed it to my wife, and she goes, "Mark, you can't publish that. You just can't publish that." Second version, I toned it down a little bit, and John was good enough to help me through the rest of the process.
Well, that's great, and I think, and I think Mark, you and I need to talk just in general because I think we've got a lot of common themes there. But in terms of leading as a project manager, being a leader, leading with empathy, whether it's project leadership or some other brand of leadership, there's really been kind of what I've learned too is kind of my go-to, right? And yeah, I've also been told, you're a little too timid about this, that, the other. Yeah, well, but it works. As long as you're getting results, that's what matters. And I think that's something you can feed back in, and it's a really nice way to advise others in the community that, if you have had issues of any stripe, you can still be successful in your chosen career. You don't have to be a project manager. You can be anything, be an astronaut, but you can still overcome. So it's a nice reminder as part of this book to be able to say, like there are things you can learn regardless of where you started.
Yeah, and really to take what most people would say is something that would make a negative out of you, right? You're not going to be able to do something. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was told that in my youth. You're not going to amount to anything. You're never going to be this or that because of how you are. And I'm like, no, let's change that. Let's change that.
Yeah,
let's
change the narrative.
figure out. Yeah.
Max and John too. And at this point, if anybody else wants to chime in with a comment or question, please do. But I'm curious a bit more about the community side. I know you're all fairly active in building community, and maybe you're active in PMI or other organizations. But I'm assuming Mark and Max, this isn't your first kick at community building in the PM space. So where have you kind of done this before? What's your strategy, I guess, in terms of building community and connections? Maybe Mark, if you want to go first.
Mark, go ahead.
Sure. Sure. I think overall, it's been interesting to see in the last 2 years, especially, it's gone from building community within the organization that I'm in to externalizing that and saying, let's look beyond and what's missing. And the way I've explained it to folks is there's need for folks that are willing to help you get a resume going to look like you know your stuff as a project manager. There's folks that are able to get your LinkedIn profile. There's folks that'll help you do PMP prep. There's advanced courses in project management. Where I've been focusing is as I'm pulling it the B2C, right? There's a lot of people in the A to B space, and there's a lot of people in the C to D space. And so I've really tried to put myself out there and bring people together, whether it's setting up referral sources, which is really a fun way, as I call it. I pull out my virtual Rolodex, which of course dates me.
I use that term all the time.
But I mean, some of the folks that I've been mentoring, they're like, I'm this way. I use my empathy. I'm not, as an example, I'm not a Latina, right? And one of the people I've been mentoring is a Latina, and she very much relates to that aspect of her life, and it's the diversity that she's fighting against. And so I was able to connect her up with someone who is a very senior project manager, program manager, that's a Latina, that has overcome whatever gatekeeping was preventing her from being successful. So that's really the focus I've been trying to have, is mentor and then collaborate with others in that space.
And Max, over to you again. Like in terms of your own networking and supporting, how's that been looking for you?
I'd like to echo what Mark said. Up until a couple of years ago, I focused on my internal teams, my internal companies, wherever I was working. And then as we started moving on, the catalyst was looking for jobs, looking for a new career, new role to move into. And then I met John through LinkedIn, and we've had a couple of very good conversations. It really kind of started opening my eyes on, hey, there's a bigger world out there than just my organization. And at the time, I think when we first met, I was, still working on my school and working on my doctorate, and it really started building me getting me more confidence. I fall into that same category as Mark, and Kristen chimed in there, and you, Kevin, about I'm nice. I am not pound my fist on the table type of person. I remember we did a project down in Las Vegas. We did the football field. I was not a huge part of it, but the general contractor, who was the project manager overseeing the whole thing, was a tyrant. She would yell and scream and throw things, get mad and all that. And Rod, who was our project manager, falls in our category. He's nice. He goes just goes with the flow and never gets mad about anything. And but he actually was part of my study because he gets that stress thing going. But we, building the community now, right now it's limited to LinkedIn and PMI Minnesota, and building the relationships that way. I mean, that sometimes it's a little hard to connect. Mark and I have been trying to connect for a month and a half here again. With Mark being in, you're in Turkey, right, Mark? And me being in Minnesota. We're talking that's a 12-hour or 8-hour difference, something like
8 hours,
that.
Challenge, yeah.
So it's hard to connect when you start meeting people that you do, connect something towards. Sometimes it's hard to get that thing going too. But that's how I've kind of built my networking and everything like that through LinkedIn and through people like John and Mark and others that are out there just practicing project management. That's what I'm interested in. So
yeah, and I'm going to throw it back to John in a second, but I just wanted to comment there because what I found, my own experience, and similar, and I think we're in a similar vintage, maybe Max and Mark a little bit. That I see some gray hair on the screen, but I think it was kind of had a myopic view of career development, maybe for the first couple of decades, right? Like, go team to team and just build these relationships, and sometimes they stayed and sometimes they didn't. So I find that now, using LinkedIn and other kinds of tools and connecting other ways really just opens up so many possible opportunities. I mean, just like this. I mean, that little recordings like this, which are really kind of fun to do, but it opens up the door to new relationships that I wouldn't have had if I wasn't, posting stuff on LinkedIn every few days, right? So I really, I think a lot of us have learned to start using that tool more effectively, and it's not just about pure self-promotion. Hi, I'm the greatest PM in the world, come hire me. It's not just that stuff. It's, I know some things, I still need to learn some things, and starting conversations and communicating with people. Yeah. And John, I know that's something you become kind of masterful at. That's how this whole project really came together, right? Was with you kind of organizing and connecting with people. How has your maybe experience with that networking changed over the last couple of years?
Oh man. So just about 2 years ago, I mean, I've been on LinkedIn for 13 years, something like that. And 2 years ago, I had maybe 900 connections, and it was exclusively in my field. And I didn't post anything except if I got a new job. I logged on maybe once a year. And I really, when I started to focus in on that, it changed my life. And it's because I met people, and we allowed each other to change each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a revelation, right? That like it opens your mind, it opens your world to other views, and you learn a lot. Exactly what you're talking about, Kevin. Like, there's so many resources out there, and Mark is helping people on a one-on-one level, as he's been talking about here. Like, that's his strength. Max, very strong, like reflective capability, right? Max has launched a newsletter now. I don't want that to go missed. Like, you can follow Max on LinkedIn and go subscribe to his newsletter. And there's some wonderful, very contemplative writing in there about project management and his experiences in project management. And these things inform us. They make us stronger. They make us better practitioners of our profession. And that's the gold right there. There's nothing, I mean, this sort of thing, right? Getting together and doing things together to engage with each other is the heart and soul of project management. I like to tell people, because I teach courses and everything, I tell people, like, yeah, PMI was founded in 1969. They landed a man on the moon without formal process groups and 49 processes and all the different things, right? And the pyramids were built. They were. That's the project, and it's the heart and soul of project management has always been: can you get everyone pulling the oar in the same direction at the same time for a unified purpose or goal? And that's why I think one of the running themes throughout the book that we just produced is that it's not about authoritarianism. It's about being able to get those things done through negotiation, through emotional intelligence, and then managing yourself to make sure you don't burn out on that. Right? And Max can attest to this, right? That stress level, it doesn't go away on its own. Right? Sometimes you need other tools and resources outside of yourself to be able to ratchet that thing down. And that's what Mark is talking about. And it's also what Jeremiah Hammond talks about in some of the things in his chapter. And it's some of the things that Kayla McGuire talks about in her chapter. It just comes up over and over again. And it's the message that the successful project managers that I've surrounded myself with online want to communicate to those who are earlier on the path, that you don't have to be wielding authority over people. Authority is good in specific measures, but you're still going to need that negotiation element, even if you have all the authority in the world, right? Max was talking about, this project manager screaming, yelling, throwing things. That didn't motivate people. That doesn't motivate people at all. She all the authority, and people still not motivated. So, it's one of those things that you learn through experience that's getting lost in the shuffle as people exit the profession. And I'm waving a red flag for that. And I've had people come back and tell me, look, it's not a big deal. If we really need their help, we'll get them in as consultants. I'm like, they're going to be in Cabo. They're not going to want to be consulting, right? And there's so much knowledge, right? There's thousands of years worth of knowledge that's going to be lost, and I'm really all about that. And the only way I think to do this through the community building, the only way to do that is getting together and doing things together that give value, like this show, like our book, like Max's newsletter, like Mark meeting one-on-one with people.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, Kevin, just something also to think about, because I've heard us mention PMI a few times now. I've heard Prince too talked about once or twice as well. Since moving overseas, a little over a year and a half ago now, I've found myself tapping into more international resources. And so, as an example, finding out that there's a group called APMG, it's not PMI, but it's a large group. I participate twice a week in a 1-hour question and answer where it is a panel of project managers, change managers, portfolio managers, etc., answering people's questions. And it's, by the way, it's available up on YouTube. Just did one about PMOs. Got one coming up April 5th. Not to be self-promotional, but April 5th to talk about change management. And there's another couple that are going to come up. But there's a lot to John's point, and what I was outlining is it's not even just within the organizations you know about.
Yeah.
There are organizations around the world with other folks with different perceptions. Talking to people that work for Saudi Aramco who are putting in multi-billion-dollar oil refineries. not the same as putting in a $3 billion or $3 million software, right? It's a different perspective that you can learn from other folks.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing. And no worries about self-promotion. I mean, that's part of what this is all about, folks. Selling a book here. Come on. But I wanna open the floor up. 8:36 by my clock, but I want to make sure if anybody else has a question on the call, they can unmute, ask away, or throw a comment in, or if you want, you can text something too. But I want to make sure people have the opportunity, they're reminded of the opportunity to do that. If we just got one more sale. Kristen said, I just ordered on Amazon. That's a fantastic. Good job. What I want to maybe move to next is this concept of stress. We've all talked about it. It is something that I wish I could tell my younger self more about. And, as people are kind of starting off in their career, regardless of career, how to handle stress and kind of your own internal change management, I guess, when you're coming into a new job, a new career. So I want to go around the room to the authors anyway, and maybe others in the call would like to as well. But what would you tell, somebody new just called you up and said, I'm just starting off, I'm freaking out, I don't know how to do this, I think I'm just going to walk away. Because you've probably been there too. You get to that point where you're just like, I can't take that. What would you tell that person? What was the first thing that you would tell them? And I'll go to Max maybe first on that one.
I think the first thing I would say, honestly, it goes back to what we've all been talking about. Get to know your people in your department or in your organization. You need to talk to people. The talking does wonders when it comes to stress. Sometimes it just turns into a venting session that you get it all out, and that may be just what you need to be able to get that going. If you're finding that stress is happening to you all the time, schedule yourself an hour every single day that you go do something. You get a magazine, you sit down in a corner, you go for a walk, you do where nobody is going to bother you. It doesn't matter that shipment that's coming over from China that has all the Samsung TVs on it is sitting in port and you need it on site in an hour. Take that hour, because it really does something for your psyche to be able to just decompress and then come back refreshed. Even go to lunch, go do something at 9 o'clock in the morning. Just go do it, because that will help. So that's the way I would say to somebody new or somebody who's experiencing these things, is just stop. Don't if you just let them build up and you just let it start building and building and building, that's when the burnout's going to happen, and that's when you're going to snap, and that's when you're going to walk away. Yeah. And that's the last thing you want to do.
Well, and thanks, Max, and I appreciate, because I think that's a big focus of your essay too, is about finding balance, right? So I think that's some really, really good advice, and something that took me a little too long to learn. Sometimes you just got to put it away and be mindful of what's going on up here, and then just go listen to music for an hour, listen to that funny podcast for an hour, get out of that state, and then you can come back a little fresher. Exactly. Mark, what about you? What would you tell that person who's losing their mind right now?
Yeah, I think I would sort of expand on the three things that Max and then now you have kind of brought up, is and maybe just kind of come at it a little different, is try and build a relationship when things aren't stressful first. Because as an example, I put together and get everyone agreement on a decision matrix, on a risk matrix at the beginning, before there is a problem, so that we have a way to say, oh, we already thought about what would if this kind of thing happens, we've already said this is how we're going to handle it, not to be in that moment, right? So having that relationship built early on, having those things defined up front, it's that. To your point, take a break, and as part of that, think about what's triggering you. What
Mm.
is it that is either frustrating you, is making you stressed? Is it you? Are you, so many times I've had people tell me, I'll go to them and say, man, that was just such a stressful meeting. They're like, Mark, you didn't seem stressed at all. I was like, you guys didn't feel that. No, you were able to maintain that.
Mhm.
Okay, that's good. But internally, I was shouting, I was screaming, I was crying.
Yeah.
And I had to think, okay, why? Was there fear? Was I being threatened? Was it fear of myself, etc.?
That's great, Mark. Thank you. John,
Oh,
person's
man.
freaking out in front of you. What's the first thing you tell them?
Well, the first thing I tell them is take a step away or back. Not that project managers, I think that a lot of the stress stems from the fact that most all of us who are good at the job, we care deeply about the success of the job. And that's good, but there is always a danger of wrapping up yourself in the success of the project. And projects close all the time. They close prematurely. They close for many reasons, often outside of our control. And many, many, many project managers I know are hanging on by their fingernails against the storm. And they are trying desperately to get those forces that are threatening the project to be held at bay so we can get across the finish line. I totally understand it. I have been there. The healthiest thing to do is to have some kind of gap between our sense of self-worth and the success of the project that we care about. And that's not easy to do because I think for many project managers, I have a sneaking suspicion, many project managers, they have things in their background, they have things in their history, and that like have trained us over time to wrap our self-worth into service, into helping, into making sure that things go right. And that's why we love frameworks, and that's why we love the right way to do things, and that's why we love standing on the table and getting things to move in the right direction and inspiring and motivating and moving things in the right direction. And so there needs to be distance. I think what Max is talking about is, at least in the short term, creating that distance, right? And I think you also need to cultivate in the longer term that distance and still maintain the balance where you care about the work. And I forget who it was. I wish I could remember and credit them on LinkedIn. I saw like yesterday, the day before. I forget if it was Kayla or someone else. She said, I want to be able to enjoy my work, but I don't need to like my work. Right? Where like I'm not the target market for my work. And oftentimes things are more acceptable at a lower standard than the one that I'm holding myself to. And, I did this exercise on LinkedIn like about a year ago. I said, what do you all think of the word adequate? Good or bad, negative or positive? And everyone, like an overwhelming tide of project managers, just flooded the comments and said, that's a negative word. I'm like, why? It means good enough. They're like, that's negative. It's never good enough to do good enough. And I'm like, that's the case. That leads to stress. That leads to freaking out. That leads to exactly the kind of things that we're talking about now. So I guess my advice tends toward you have to leave a little bit. Sometimes in a toxic environment, you need to leave entirely. But you've got to leave a little bit and have that gap there.
Yeah, Kristen's just saying, my professor used to say, sometimes good enough is good enough. And yeah, I would agree. I think I've certainly fallen victim to this myself, especially when I've had some larger projects in the nonprofit space, for example. And you're impacting lives. And it's it's not just software release, that's important, but there's levels, and you really get attached, and that is good. But it can be dangerous if you take it too far, and that's when you do burn out fairly quickly, or the stress just becomes too much to handle.
Yeah.
So you've got to be able to have that separation.
Absolutely, especially in service areas, right? Nursing,
Yeah.
teaching. I spent 17 years as a librarian, and that is entirely oriented around the cause, right?
Yeah.
If you don't care and you don't go above and beyond, you don't care about literacy and people making their lives better, or democracy, or whatever the talking point is of the day. And that leads people to I called it self-immolation on the altar of librarianship. Like, people just set themselves on fire. Like, they're people working till 8, 9 o'clock at night, and there's never a rest. There's never a respite. It's always proving that you care, and that's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
And if you truly care, keep yourself fresh for the marathon. Don't burn yourself out on a sprint.
Put your mask on before others.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a great place to wrap, but I wanted to just open it up one more time to the room. I know there's a few comments that have come in the chat, but I wanted to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share maybe their own bit of advice if they want, or to ask any questions of our panel before we wrap it up for the day. Feel free to click the raise hand button. If not, that's fine, no pressure, but I want to make sure we have the
I have
opportunity.
a question.
Priya, yeah, go ahead.
Right now, I agreed with your John's point. I want more insight. I'm an aspiring PM. I'm just started to explore my career and trying to uh, take my next step to PM level. But nowadays, I have noticed like the traditional methodologies, everything is changing to agile mindsets, and every organizations are removing the PM roles. So they're building as a entire one team, and there is no separate project managers in majority of the teams. Especially if you are going in IT industry or retail industries, there is no separate PM they are planning. The mindset is changing. So how can we manage these cost management, risk management activities in this new mindset as a PM? Yeah, I know there is no PM in coming forward, but how we are going to do these activities then? That's my question.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quickly. I think, we talked about various communities. There's a couple of different communities on LinkedIn that I'm a part of. One of which includes Max and John and a number of other folks, yourself, Kevin. But there's also a group of folks that I call the OGs. We're all the 30-year plus project managers, and we're seeing some of the same conversations that were had 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago about other things. So the first thing I would say, Priya, is, yeah, Agile's the flavor of the month right now. It's pushing a lot of buttons. Everyone is arguing even what it is. And so, first of all, don't push yourself into that corner. Two, there's a lot of project management that's outside of software development, which is really where you're finding your Agile for the most part. There's Agile in some business processes and things like that. But as an example, my background is in healthcare, and working with clinicians and making healthcare better and making it more cost effective and things like that. Those areas recognize the need for project management and will always recognize it. They're not going to run off and say, "Oh, we can do this," in a more adaptive, I think is the latest term today I think I saw, instead of Agile.
So there is still scope that we are moving to the next step as PM. Still there is scope here. That's what you are saying, right, Mark?
I'm saying there's still opportunity. I think it's I think there's a wave, and yes, it will change some people's perceptions, and it may change some organizations to go a certain way for a while. But ultimately, I think the hands will, the pendulum will swing back the other way. And if it doesn't, then focus in other areas. Find areas that you can apply your project management skills that don't go away.
Thank you, Mark.
John?
John, yeah, you have your hand up there. Go ahead.
Thank you.
yeah, just, we're not done as a profession. We're never done. There are waves, as Mark says, of things that come and go. But if you start following people in the agile space, there's a lot of disagreement, there's a lot of disharmony, there's a lot of disunity. Agile's not just one thing. There are more than 50 agile frameworks in use out there today. And Scrum is only 60% of the use in Agile today. And if you are interested, I do recommend you follow Adrian Dooley, who's one of our authors for the book. He's got a great series he's doing right now on hybrid project management, and how a lot of the things that PMI is saying now, hybrid project management, are things that project managers have been doing for decades. And so it's a good thing to kind of reframe the problem. If you're focused in on IT and you're focused in on software, there are going to be heavy influences in Agile. However, the employers and the organizations are starting to figure out that sometimes a way of working that does not encompass risk management is a disaster waiting to happen as well. So the pendulum will swing back.
So, yeah, you're right.
Okay, last call for any other questions or comments in the collected gallery of professional project people. Going once, twice. There you go. So we'll wrap it up there. Today, I want to say thank you so much, John Connolly, Max Boller, and Mark Rozner for joining us today. Great conversation, and I look forward to getting my own paper copy of the book that I'm going to order from Amazon today. So thanks so much for writing it, first of all, and thanks so much for being here to talk about it. Really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you
Yeah,
all
thanks,
so much for
Kevin.
having us.
Yeah, and feel free to connect with us all. I mean,
Yes, please.
we talked
Absolutely.
about community. Reach out, connect.